So, without any further ado, let's kickstart our first session, which is titled Transforming Business with Generative AI, Unlocking New Possibilities. But before we begin, let me introduce our esteemed panelists to all of you. And as I call out your names, I would request you all to come and join us on stage. First, we have Mr. Arvind Kumar, Head IT and Infosec for Genisys Group. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Take any of this. Next, we have with us Mr. Chinmaya Suryavamse, BI Practice Leader for Healthcare Global Enterprises Limited. Next up, we have Mr. Santhosh Venkatakumar, CIO and Operations Site Lead for VMWare India. Also joining us today is Mr. Swapnasarit Sahu, Director Data Science for Walmart Global Tech India. And last but not the least, we have with us Mr. Mukund Shastri, Group VP and Chief Data Science Officer, Comviva Tech Mahindra Company. And to moderate this discussion, may I call upon stage Mr. Mohit Gupta, Senior Director of Sales at Dun & Bradstreet, India. Over to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you. Am I audible, guys? So this is something new to me, to get adjusted to this format of panel discussion. But good evening, everyone, and thanks for making it. We are going to have a very interesting discussion on a very interesting subject, which is Gen AI. And while I was preparing myself for this, I was just trying to recall that in the recent past, we have heard so much about fintechs, we have heard about blockchain technologies, AI, and before we could digest and understand as laymen, there is something new which comes in. So there is a ever-changing world, and the way that technologies really change is really mind-boggling. And as professionals and as organizations, if we have to remain relevant, I think we need to adapt to all these changes pretty fast. Because if you see Gen AI, they have the capability to generate text, images, other media forms, and the generative models that they are turning out are the game changers. Now, if you look, the Gen AI models today can read large amount of data and still come out with a very precise output, whether it is on the sustainability piece or it's on bringing out optimization in the supply chain of any organization. Now, while we will be discussing on various aspects of this, I think we have structured this panel today into 6 broad themes. So we'll be touching about understanding the true potentials of Gen AI, the best practices on Gen AI, some of the business use cases across industries, and then opportunities and challenges, and then of course the future of Gen AI. So with that, I'll try to get into my first questions, which I'll be putting to you, Arvind, and maybe try to have some of your bites on how do you see that Gen AI is going to be relevant or instrumental in terms of new product development, the sales and marketing piece, then software engineering and the customer experience. Because when I interact with some of my industry friends, and especially the bankers, they say that probably Gen AI really helps them in terms of reading post-transaction documents and then ensure that they report accordingly. Because earlier, all things were being done manually, and then they really struggled in terms of the quantum of the documents to be read and ensuring compliance to each of these documents. So maybe your thoughts on it, Arvind.
Thank you. I think that's a bullet to me straight, right? Okay. See, there are 2 parts of the Gen AI. One, we talk about business aspect, another one is the general aspects, as we were discussing quite a few times earlier as well. If we talk about Gen AI support in terms of marketing or product development or anything, then you just throw any query in LLM format, mean whatever you want to extract out of it, it gives you the precise result or relevant result out of it. For the programmers or the developers, if I need to write some PowerShell or Python or any kind of a code, I just say I want to write this kind of a scenario, give me the code out of it. So it gives you the complete code, and which you must be taking up approximately half an hour. Maybe first time you are writing the code, then you are testing that up, some bugs are coming, still you are fixing. But here, you are getting the ready-made code, you just need to fix the minor bugs if it comes to.
Correct.
Similarly, for the marketing, if you say, you can say, okay, I am in this particular segment, I want to prepare my presentation or my marketing, you can say, bite. Give me top 10 trend across the globe. So it will give you, extract out of it, and give you what is happening to specific that particular segment.
Correct.
Similar way, if we talk about the operations and the support, so Gen AI comes pretty handy if it is enabled well. So that's why I said these two things we can say it's a generic use, but when it comes to the customer experience, it becomes business use case. Business use case, you need to have your own data, you need to have your own AI module to train on your data to give the personalized prospect to your customer experience, right? So we are having certain chatbots on the support front where you say, okay, it gives you 10 options, you select one, it gives you answer based on that. What if Gen AI with NLM is being introduced to it? You just say, I need a bank statement, rather than asking something specific, okay, only bank statement or only last transaction or something. You can say, what was spent on Amazon on this day? So general chatbots and normal AI cannot answer to that. If you introduce NLM, it gives you better experience. Secondly, personalized experience, it gives the history, what you have asked in previous context, or what are the things that you have served for, and it gives you with relevance to that, right? So I think Gen AI with the LLM modules will give you a better and much faster response and much better response and much better experience compared to what we are having earlier.
Because they have been trained on large set of data.
Absolutely.
So maybe, Mukund, your perspective, in case you have a different take on this.
Yeah. So I have been using Gen AI now, I think last 5 to 6 months. Right? Before that, it was AI, last 5 to 6 years. So first 1 month went in what is Gen AI and how it is different than AI. So that we tried to find out. And in terms of the question that you asked, product development, marketing, software engineering, and CRM, right? How do you use this and what are the use cases? That's a question each one of us had. Where do I use Gen AI, right? It can do so many things. And especially in the context of data, text, and videos, right? So on that area, first thing in the product development area, you develop a product. Comviva, which I am representing today, is a product development company. You have already products, but those are not user-friendly. You need a product which can answer the questions of the user, business user, quickly. How does this product work? Where do I go to search for something on the product? So these questions are being addressed in a product development process to have a chatbot which can be user-friendly chatbot. You don't need the training to be given to the user for a product when you sell a product to them, but the chatbot will answer those. And we tried that really with Gen AI. It worked. I can put prompt engineering for a Gen AI. I can do a fine-tuning for a Gen AI model, LLM model, with lots of documents about the product. If I have a document of 100-pager for a product, a user will not read it.
Correct.
I feed it into Gen AI, create a chatbot around it, attach that somewhere in one corner of the product, and they will get the answers around it. So that's on the product development part. It's to enhance the user experience. Second
and
part.
Maybe I can add a bit out here.
Yes, please.
Is like say in banking, and I talk banking because I was a banker for 2 decades, so I'll give you a lot of examples on the banking. So when you have a lot of RBI compliances to be done on a particular transaction,
Yes.
or when you sign a loan agreement with a borrower,
Yeah.
and these, documents are into pages and pages,
Yes.
and while you transact, it is very difficult for a human to refer back to those documents
Exactly.
and those compliances.
Exactly.
But if you have a Gen AI built tool, which as you rightly said, maybe a chatbot or maybe some sort of an interactive tool,
Yeah.
it has really helped it is really helping the relationship managers to refer back to those clauses.
Exactly. So that's the power of GenAI we see in case of a text summarization, in case of answering the questions of the user to the point. The second part is you talked about marketing. In the marketing area, you have many interfacing. The marketer has to interface with the customer. Interfacing has to be beautified, has to be more creative. It could be content that you are sending to the end customer. Can I be creative in that? An email going to a customer which will be more attractive, which is more personalized. A WhatsApp message going to a customer, can it be more personalized? So there GenAI works. And that's what in marketing domain what we are seeing is, I can create an email which is a combination of text as well as images. GenAI helps me for a creative image which may be more valid for that person. I can express something with GenAI for a customer who is of a persona sporty type. I can communicate a message with the help of a football somewhere on the screen, a sport player playing something, and also let's say I want to sell a SIM card. So attach that with the GenAI, creating some creative message there, right? So that will touch the heart of the customer. That's how we can have the creative AI, image-wise, content-wise, more personalized content-wise for a end customer. And that is possible in the content optimization, content creation area for marketing. There are a few more things in marketing like sentiment analysis. GenAI, if you try it, you do a prompt engineer. If something happens like someone says like this, treat it as positive. Someone says like this, treat it as negative. These 2-3 prompts, if you give it to it, it will try to create more accurate. The GPT-4 kind of LLMs are helping it to more accurate sentiment analysis about a customer. And that is a core of a marketing business, right? It tries to identify sentiment around a customer and then uses the offers around it, campaigns around it. There it helps a lot. Few more things are around the targeted advertising. Again, there are contents, creative contents, image-based, have the creative images. There it helps around. The fourth part is, let's say I want to build a customer persona. In a customer persona, what the customer is doing in terms of his behavior pattern, I would use AI and GenAI together in order to create a personalized offer for a customer. So it's a combination of AI and GenAI I will do in order to create a innovative customer message via an offer or a campaign in the customer analytics area. So that's in short around the product part, the marketing part, and the fourth part is software engineering. Code generation, as my colleague has highlighted here. Code generation, along with that, what we can do in software engineering is documentation reading, summarization of document. When a customer sends a big proposal or a requirement, I can convert that document into summary form and understand what they are talking about. Same problem, hundreds of pages of a tender that comes in, and you need to know all the key contents around it. So it could be my initial scanner of an RFP or a proposal in a software engineering scenario in order to analyze it and then get the crux of the document and then use it for the next level of responses. So that's in short all these 3 to 4 areas, GenAI use cases are valid for.
Okay.
Basically.
And while you were briefing, you touched upon a word LLM.
Yes,
and I'm parking it for a while because I'll be chewing your brains on LLM while we'll talk about the challenges around Gen AI because that's one of the concerns most of the people I have heard. But I think moving on to Santhosh, what Mukund spoke about was text and images as something which probably is the most popular outcome of a Gen AI. Do you see spread across other modalities of data when it comes to Gen AI?
Thank you, Mohit. First of all, thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
I know it's a very interesting setup and I'm showing my back to some of you, so I apologize for that. But I just want to build on something that my colleague said here. I think one, we just have to be very clear on what is AI versus what is the difference between AI and generative AI, right? Because AI has been existing, neural networks has been existing, and therefore we have to distinguish between the two, which is, going back to your question on the product side, it is just bringing the entire ecosystem together, which means the developers don't have to be doing things on their own. They are now potentially, the sales teams or marketing teams are also interfacing with the same tools and getting outcomes that the developer had not envisioned before. So you're literally actually bringing interaction into your products, which is something unique because it helps you continuously evolve those products as you go. So that increases, one, you bring the ecosystem together, you accelerate the process of development, and you could potentially automate that, right? I'll just leave it at that. Coming back to your question on modalities, look, again, when you look at generative AI as a technology, I think all of us should think of ourselves as creators. I mean, that's a different mental model, to be honest, right? And if you think of yourself as a creator, there are two aspects of creativity. One, the creativity applies to multiple realms of things. You know, it doesn't have to be restricted to development alone. It doesn't have to be restricted to art. Creativity can encompass and go into multiple, areas, activities, whatnot. The second thing is there is no limit to content creation. So if you are in the manufacturing industry, if you are in the automotive industry, if you are in some kind of development, you know how many cars you can manufacture and you put out there. There is a limit to how many cars you want to manufacture and put it out there. But content creation and generation, there is no limit to that. So when you marry these two, which is the scope of where creativity can apply and there is no limit to content generation, suddenly it's exponential. So the reason why I'm making that point is today, I truly believe that we are probably in the early stages of generative AI. So the usual models about text to text, text to images, text to audio, potentially text to video, text to music, that model could continue to evolve, and I truly believe that we are just in the infancy of some of those, right? Now, on top of this, what becomes really interesting is when you start looking at use cases, because we are literally talking about a horizontal platform. When you verticalize that and see how does generative AI apply to healthcare industry, how does it apply to gaming industry, marketing industry, suddenly you have a bunch of use cases which you hadn't thought about, and you're dealing with different kinds of data set. And you're dealing with very unique situations and problem statements that needs to be solved, and therefore the modalities of data that we have today versus what could potentially come in future, or as we are saying, it is happening as we speak, it's going to evolve and it's going to transform, because end of the day it's all about creativity, and there is no bound to creativity. And last thing I would say is, it's a continuous feedback loop. We will never probably be saying, hey, I have developed a model and it should work. You interact with it and everything is good to go. No, I mean, we've already seen that the more you interact, the first ChatGPT version was put out as a testing tool for all of us, right? I think all of us started using it and we got very interesting answers, and now it's much better, which means there is a continuous feedback loop there. That means the data which we are training today for these models to use versus potentially the feedback loop of what data it should use could also continuously evolve. So it's definitely not restricted to what it is today, but a big chunk of that in near term is absolutely going to be text in near future.
Maybe just I can add to that one more word to that. Limitless creativity is with efficiency. Yeah. So I think moving on and staying on this side with Arvind, with Mr. Sahu. So this Gen AI is going to stay here, and what it brings with it is data and the compliances. So what are the best practices that probably you like to talk about data and the compliances that probably would be required while you run Gen AI models?
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Mohit. I would not say it is just restricted to data or data quality for sake. What I believe is the best practices. There are multiple directions to that. I mean, it is not a hype or something, right? We started seeing the development in the product completely transforming the industry. Given that, right, I believe there are like 5 dimensions to where the Gen AI best practices are. First is about people, right? I mean, talking about the coders or the developers or the data scientists that we lead. Do they are able to use the things properly? So you need a skill development of them first to use the Gen AI tool. At the same time, I think there is also a skill development or the training of the entire company required to use the tools. Not just for the person who gonna contribute to the product, but for the persons to use it. Similarly, I look at the other aspect of Gen AI where other best practices that you can bring in is the processes, right? You need to have a process to identify, even before you go and start a Gen AI project, right? To identify, right, how it's going to change, right, your product or your services, right? That's very important because you need to know your goal, right? It's not that you always use the capability of it because there are multiple capabilities of the Gen AI technology. So you need to see how it is going to change in terms of process. So one is a product differentiator. How would you bring it by putting Gen AI? The second part of it is how can I increase the productivity? So my panelists also, the panelists over here talked about like the code generation part or testing being automated now or one code to the another code translation, right? All these are basically creating your productivity increase. So you have people, you have process, right? Now I would say data, I would broadly divide into three categories of it. First is accessibility of the data, right? These are data hungry machines, right? Taking a zero shot learning. I mean, when in our world we use the zero shot learning, we talk about just taking the LLM and applying it, right? That might not achieve the level of personalization you need, right? For that, to achieve what you need to provide a lot much data on top of the basic LLM or basic stability diffusion or so on to provide the personalized thing for your industry, right? And that needs a lot of data. That means you need to have data accessibility across department. You need to have the data quality checks, like your data has to be consistent, it has the it should be refreshed periodically, it has to have the quality associated, all the data quality measures apply when you train a Gen AI on or basically nobody trains as trains because we know it's like damn expensive to train a Gen AI, but retraining of the model on top of it. That's one aspect of it. But that's accessibility is necessary, but it's also evil for you, right? Because when you give access to such a powerful tool, right, there is a huge chance of your IP leakage. There is a huge chance of your customer data leakage, right? There is a huge chance of the things that you don't want going to the Gen AI because you don't know what it's going to consume it. So that brings to the next aspect of the data is their data security and governance. That is must to establish before even you train a model or create a product, right? You need to have the checks and bound. You need to have the design principle, which is like privacy by design from the beginning point of view, to check the Gen AI tools that doesn't produce any data leak or that doesn't reveal your customer data to others. So if you have to do data masking, you have to restrict certain data, or you have to limit the data by RAG flow, which are like augmented flows. You need to have to know that what data you can permit and what data you can't permit. So that brings me to the data governance. And the third point in the data, what I believe is most important, is the responsibility, right? I mean, I'm a machine learning professional for 20 years. There was no regulation. We were in the wild, wild west, right? And what we used to realize in the past, that we can train model on anything, but that's no longer the case anymore, right? And how? Because there are regulations in place. Like you can't take, for example, race data or gender specific data to train a model, and create a different credit score, for example. So there are, to deal that, you need to have a responsible AI. So responsible AI as a field is evolving, which says that how can you build machine learning models, okay, to make sure that the model that is produced is to the requirement of the regulation. So it is samely applicable for the GenAI model, right?
No, I think a couple of things which you mentioned, and that reminds me of a very, maybe at the cost of digressing, a small story where we as a company are into business of data cleansing and enrichment, what forms the basis of our master data management. And one of our clients where we actually were negotiating a contract, they said, no, we don't need you because we already did the master data management leveraging ChatGPT. Now I said, okay, well done. God bless you, because now you have exposed your data to the world. So I think that's where I think corporates have to be also ensuring that they behave responsible, and it's not about responsible AI itself, it's about the people actually who are running those models.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So moving on to this, from here to back to Arvind, to you, where we talked about the skill set, and the leadership orientation is definitely required for GenAI, because if you have to run this and if you have to evolve further, you need people. So do you see a challenge there in terms of the talent pool available?
See, Gen AI is there, but how to use that Gen AI with respect to your organization or with respect to your business? What is the intent to use it? Where to use it, right? These are the things and these are the questions that need to be answered by a person who is leading or driving that force, right? So these skill sets, to understand what it is, how it is to be utilized, where to utilize, what is required to make it happen. So those kind of things that is therein. So intent to be cleared, intent to be analyzed with respect to the business, with respect to any project that is going on. Intent is required, how I'm going to use it responsibly, as he already said, because governance is also part of the Gen AI. If you give the data to Gen AI, so you do not know what is therein. So transparency is one of the things that is need to be looked at it, right? So along with it, how your model is going to be trained, how it is going to cost you, how much time does it need. So all those aspects are required in a leader to implement any of the Gen AI. It should not be just like that, just for the sake I'm going to implement Gen AI because there is a buzzword. Does it really required for my business to implement Gen AI? Is it I'm having enough data with me to implement Gen AI? Somebody says, okay, I'm having hundreds of GBs of the data, but that is peanuts for a Gen AI kind of a model, right? So we need to think, we need to see, we need to go slow and understand what we are looking for. Even if, let's say, we are having huge data, we are having data lakes, we are having petabyte or terabyte of the data, and I want to run the Gen AI model on it, what kind of a data I am having with me? Is that data is clean? Because on whatever data you are going to train your model is going to give the output based on that. So you need to have your basics ready even before starting the Gen AI kind of a project. So your data has to be clean, it has to be properly matrix mapped, and that. So I'm not going into the deep, but the leader who is there and to drive that Gen AI kind of a project should understand all these business aspects of it before even to drive it up.
Yeah. So rightly said. I think, in fact, I was recently reading a McKinsey report on the talent pool that is required for some of the technologies that are coming in, settling in, and the sort of qualification it requires, the coding it requires, and the headcount that's available globally. And I think the good news for the people around here is that there is a serious shortfall. So I think if we all train ourselves into that direction, there is a lot of stuff for us. So moving on to Chinmaya, and we all were enlightened with the use case that you talked with all of us in the green room in terms of how the way you are working on data application in the hospitality industries. Maybe some thoughts around that, that maybe for the larger audience, and maybe some of the use cases that you foresee as part of the Gen AI that will become more relevant.
Yeah, so actually at HCG, what we are currently building a data lake, so which is bringing in the administration data as well as the clinical data as well. So when I talk about the administration data, one of the biggest functions that comes into picture is the supply chain within a hospital, because about having multiple hospitals, you'll have multiple pharmacies also. So over here, what happens for us is we are bringing this AI along with predictive analysis to currently show us what is the stock availability within in the form of drugs as well as in the form of the consumables, what is the availability in each of these units. Along with that, it also says what is the what are those products which are moving, which are fast moving, which are not moving, what is the drugs which are expiring. So all this data we are able to analyze now, and this gives us an opportunity to make sure that we probably purchase the amount of products as per how we want for a particular unit. And if there's anything which is not moving from in one unit, let's say in Bangalore, one of our pharmacies, we might not be having one drug which is not being sold or probably not being used that often, but this is the same drug which is being used probably in Shimoga. So what happens is it will give us an opportunity to either move this over there or probably continue in future to ensure that we start reducing this entire purchasing of this particular product. So this is one that we are doing right now. And next what we are talking about is more of the clinical lake also, that the clinical data lake, which will have the data of the EMR, our HIS, as well as we'll also have the data of genomics, because in a cancer industry, like I was discussing earlier with all of us, so in a cancer industry, it's all about what is a primary cancer site, what is the secondary cancer site. So identifying the primary cancer site is of much prominence for any doctor. And this identifying this particular primary cancer site is needs a lot of reading through all the history of every patient's documentations. So we talked about earlier, before having the applications like EMR, RIS, LIS, and genomics, digital pathologies. Before getting into all this, we all would remember that, in a hospital you will have, a bunch of files, this thick files of a patient history, of a patient data. Now reading through that, for a doctor or for an, a physician, it is very difficult to go through this entire thing and then perform clinical trials, which used to, consume a lot of time. So, now with the help of Gen AI, we will be able to we will be able to quickly read this entire documentation soon. We will be able to read what is the primary site of a cancer, which needs to be treated at the right time, so that the chances of the cancer recurring on the patient would reduce, and the right treatment is provided to the patient. And at the same time, we'll also be able to tell for this particular patient how many such kind of patients have been treated in the past, what was the diagnosis that was a part of these patients, and what was the treatments given, what was the test given. So basically in the healthcare industry, there's a lot that we see that we are going to do in terms of Gen AI. Starting, like I said, is what we started with the administration part. Now we are slowly moving to the clinical part.
Since I'm on this side, so maybe any one of you like to pick up any efficiencies that you see that the supply chain can bring, that can come into any supply chain because of Gen AI.
So I would say that, like I said earlier, in terms of efficiency, it's more of, trying to reduce the, to be in a layman's term, wastage, right? Or excess purchase. So in terms of, one is that you will be able to save a lot of cost. And secondly, in terms of the product, in terms of the consumables, in terms of the drugs, in terms of any in a supply chain, probably it's more about the products, right? It doesn't make any sense to keep a product as is in your warehouse. Like, let's talk about one of the business model of Toyota. Just to digress about this, from this, I once read that Toyota never has a warehouse. So when you buy a car, it directly goes to the manufacturing unit. It gets assembled and it comes and gets delivered to you. That is the right way, and probably Gen AI will help us to reach to that level in future when it comes to larger sets of businesses and more number of warehouses across the industries.
So you're saying is it will going to enable more of GIT stuff, so you don't have to stock large volumes, and you can predict what sort of consumption is going to come in near future.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Moving to Santhosh, in terms of like with Gen AI, it's invariable that people will be talking about open AI systems. Do you see the corporates will adopt to it, and if they adopt, what sort of challenges do you foresee on that?
Great question. I mean, I think, look, when I look at generative AI, and a lot of C-suite discussion should really be around, is any technology an existential threat for the company, right? Because most of the time you look at what do you want to address for the customer, not necessarily start with technology as a starting point. But this is a particular instance where it has to be part of a C-suite discussion, which is this an existential threat and should we do something about it? Story writing is very structured, which means generative AI should be able to tell stories. And when this came about, I played around with quite a few tools that'll give you fantastic actually stories about filmmaking, and you can build your own new avatar movie and a better version of that, and you truly have to believe in that. So bottom line is, I think relevancy for the company, for your business cases, as my colleague was mentioning, is very relevant as a starting point, and you need to have that. But let me just address the big elephant in the room, which is security aspect to the generative AI, right? Generative AI is more of a disruptive technology as well as a disruptive threat. And so it's really a double-edged sword. But whenever benefits outweigh the risks, you probably have to do something about it. And that's really what generative AI, it's all about, right? A lot of questions that CIOs should be asking is, can I, in terms of security, I would say is, am I able to address unknown threats coming in, ransomwares, phishing attacks, or simple things like, is my existing infra able to handle the rest of generative AI? Because none of our infra was built with generative AI in mind. And so the volume and the speed at which these attacks can happen is also going to be exponentially different than what it used to be. You can read some of the reports which says that 80% plus of the risks or attacks, they are attributing it to generative AI. Now, whether it is right or wrong, it's different, but that's the mindset of the mentality of a lot of CXOs today, that you have to be ready in order to address that. Now, what do you mean? And what do you do as a company? I mean, first of all, I'm not going to touch upon some wonderful points that everybody has made here in terms of data security, privacy, and all of those is very important. But the key thing is really for you to have a strategy. Unknowingly, you can do a lot of mistakes with generative AI. That's something that you got to avoid, right? I mean, the first time when the technology came about, we made sure that people understand that you cannot just upload the data into a training model, which is a proprietary information of the company, and then have that out there and still expect some results out of it. So I think the key thing is really stopping those unknowing mistakes that you or me, anybody can actually make, and having a policy around it. The interesting thing is, compared to the pre, I would say, Gen AI era versus the Gen AI era, you'll see a lot of companies now having proactive policies going to the extent of saying, if I am attacked, do I have a policy to pay the person who is actually attacking us as a victim, right? Now, can you imagine, and there are several companies who have done that. So having policies to do that, which means the earlier state was a reactive way of addressing security. Now you have to be proactive in figuring out, how do I deal, number one, with, do I have an understanding of that? Do I have capabilities to do that? Can I use the technology to my advantage And am I ready to be prepared to, I would say, utilize, deploy, and avoid the risks that comes with the technology, right? So these are all things that you have to be ready as an organization, because security is one of those things that is super important when it comes to generative AI. And I think you cannot do as an individual company, you have to work with the ecosystem, because you might be using LLM models that has been distributed by somebody else. So there are companies who are now providing services in terms of evaluating the accuracy of those models. So really, you got to be on top of what you are using, what environment, are you building on open systems or not, and internally what infrastructure you have set up that caters to these needs. So that's probably what I would say. It's more of how do you use it, are you ready to use it, rather than should you use it at this stage.
Yeah, I think very important, because cost of getting breached is huge, so you need to be really there. Just moving on from here and moving to you, Mukund. I mean, earlier technologies you saw that probably it was first the coders who developed the technologies, and they were developing it further before it reached to masses. But with Gen AI, the move has been so fast that even coders are still figuring out what's next out here, and everybody's talking about Gen AI, right? And in that scenario, if you look, the approach which was earlier in case of, let's say, AI or maybe your blockchain technology, where it was more of an experimental approach the corporates took. Do you see the corporates will align to this particular technology in a very different way rather than something which was experimental earlier?
Yeah. If we compare Gen AI with the previous AI or non-AI era also, Gen AI has a difference. Difference is there is no coding needed. Earlier with AI, blockchain or other technologies, you have to do coding as per the need of business. So there is a lead time involved. When a new technology came in, let's say AI 5 or 6 years before, what we had to do is first understand what is this technology. So you need to train your people. Then you go for use case creation. Training people is a lead time that is required. Use case creation is that it will work for me to the accuracy level I want. In Gen AI, it is a model that has been tested across billions of parameters. It has covered all kind of data situations. The basics of AI is more variations of data you see, the model should capture that, and if that variation is now coming at this moment, it will try to predict the next y-axis data point. That is the basics of AI. In case of Gen AI, you are training it across all variety of data, 2 billions of records or fields you are trying to do. So it is capturing all kind of scenarios. As a result, the accuracy of the model is pretty high. After 3.5 GPT and ahead, it is very high accuracy. So that you don't need to spend time in accuracy measurement. Then where does time go? Naturally, our synchronization is faster here than we used to have it earlier in the AI scenario. So where we will be spending time, decide the use case, implement it on Gen AI, find out which cloud operator will help me better in terms of the cost part of it. And third part is the data security part, as he has highlighted. For data security, I need to have that LLM in my instance of data. I do not need to have an LLM which is publicized or available for the public use. So that cloud provider which provides me to create an instance of my LLM where I would train it on my data, the enterprise data, so that it is available only for me. And naturally the IP right and other protection acts are taken care. So to summarize it, in Gen AI we are trying to, with the virtue of the technology itself, we are trying to reduce the lead times. It is already near synchronized way of working. And for it to work better, we need to have people who would basically need to be trained on the prompt engineering, right? How do I do it for my business? So we have to plan in terms of how do I do prompt engineering, what my prompt engineers will need to know. Will they need a domain knowledge? Will they need a technical knowledge? No technical knowledge is needed here. You need only domain knowledge. So I need to bring the platform of Gen AI, have the people who will be doing prompt engineering around it, and then I am ready to use it. Third part in this is, in an organization, Gen AI is now pervasive. Pervasive means across everyone and anybody can use it. So in this scenario, for everybody to use it, I need some centralized collaboration platform for Gen AI. My department has done something, other department has done something. they need to have the APIs ready so that other will reuse. That will do synchronization more faster. So that is something I think I can think of. GenAI by virtue itself is very fast in order to use. We need to have some collaboration. We need to have some training of the people so that it would be able to be adapted faster, basically.
So considering that we're running short of time, I'll just quickly.
One of the studies which was conducted in US and UK where, like I said earlier, the EMR is widely being used. Most of the doctor's time goes in, documenting in this particular applications. So on a short term, if I see, probably, using, what Santhosh was talking about earlier, voice to text features, wherein a doctor can just tell what is, going on with the patient, discussing with the patient, and there is, probably a listening device near him, like an Alexa, or, his phone, anything that can, dictate, that could actually take his data and put it into EMR. So what happens over here is it will actually save about 60% of his time. So he can, a physician can focus more on patient care rather than sitting and documenting in the application. So that is one of the, short-term, impact that I can see, and probably, one of the benefits for a healthcare industry that I can see for us. But like I said earlier, when it comes to a long term, it is too early for us to even talk about it. Yeah.
So my last question, which is a rapid fire to all of you, and it's about what are the challenges that you see in Gen AI, and I'll start from here. And you only have to give 1 point. You don't have to speak at all the challenges. Just one challenge which you see is the foremost.
Security, as he said, because it is a dual-sided sword, the developers or the ethical people, or you can say good people, can use it for constructive. Similar way, the black hats kind of a people can use for destructive, which is already happening in the current state. So that's the one thing from my side.
So he talked security. What about you?
I would say the lack of data as of now, because as much as data is still available, I don't think that's still enough for a Gen AI.
Sure.
It doesn't.
I think you should talk about LLMs. Do the LLMs really exist for Gen AI?
LLMs for Gen AI, yes, they exist. Yeah, and LLMs actually, different kind of cloud provider have created the LLMs of different types, and LLMs are helping out for the text generation. They are not for image generation. There are some other models which are available for image generation, and they need to be trained well, right? They may have accuracy problems, so that's one of the challenge.
That's my apprehension.
That's one of the challenge. So they have the accuracy problem, and in order to overcome that, we need all the other processes around. So earlier there were data scientists as a role, or senior data scientist, or data architect, or data science architect. Now we need the prompt engineer. We need the AI ethics lead to manage all these LLMs and overall things, basically.
Moving to you, sir.
Yeah. What is the challenge? I look at it in terms of using the Gen AI is the retraining part. The cost of retraining is massive, right? And the other part, I look at it like building something from the scratch. Like we talk about open system, right? The open system can be really open system when all the companies can produce their own, right? And unfortunately, the technology cost to build something from the scratch is massively beyond for many companies, because it costs hundreds of $millions just to train, right? Even the retraining cost is so high, right? Only few business case it can attack. Not because even if you get the benefit, right, of retraining to your own use case, the cost involved to the business case it solves might not be the right.
Last word from Santhosh.
Thanks, Mohit. So I probably think you need to know the use cases, as with any technology. The challenge with generative AI is it's so horizontal and applicable to entire various different industries that you can get lost. It's like a chat engine. You give it to your kid, he can be chatting all day without any objective. Or for generative AI, as a company, somebody talked about the value. You really need to know where you're going to get the value out of this technology and know your use cases.
Challenges still remain on, as we talked about, LLMs. Are they trained actually on the large data sets, and whether these data sets had any algo biases? And of course, the second most important is the data privacy that probably it can expose an organization to you. Thank you guys for your contribution to the discussion, and thanks to the audience for patiently hearing us. Thank you.